Hi, it's Chris from Third Moon Brewing. And yeah, I guess that's all we need to say, right?
Yeah, I'm Steve from Third Moon Brewing. I also go by the name Bebo.
Nice. All right. So first question. Of course I have to pull it up. Okay. How is beer made?
So beer is made from taking grains, normally barley. You mix it with hot water and we'll extract all the sugars out of that barley, boil it, add some hops, and then you add, cool it down and you add yeast. And the brewer's yeast is what ferments that sugar and turns that into alcohol.
Can you make beer from any ingredients?
As long as it's a source of sugar, you can, but it wouldn't always be called beer. So if you take grape sugar from grapes, then it would be wine. If you take it from honey, it would normally be mead. So normally beer would have cereal grains in that, like barley or rice or oats.
Can you make beer at home or does it have to be at a brewery?
You can make it at home, and that's how most brewers start. So home brewing is a very popular gateway in for folks who are into craft beer to start to learn about brewing. You could have kits and you could start brewing at home. That's how I started. It's a really popular hobby.
Why is some beer warm and some cold?
So it comes down to historical preferences. So a lot of warmer beer that's served closer to room temperature comes from England, where they would serve it at cellar temperature. So pre-refrigeration, they would just dig a deep hole in the ground. You could get it to about 15 C, and that's the way it was served. So newer styles of beer, obviously post refrigeration, when that was invented, are able to be served cold, and so that's just traditionally the way they're given to the customers.
Cool. What is the difference between ale and lager?
So those are the two main types of beer. So, and it really comes down to genetic differences in the yeast. So there's ale yeast, which ferments at a warmer temperature, and lager ferments at a colder temperature. So the lagers, since they're fermented colder, they'll give off less flavors from the yeast. So it's a more clean, neutral beer. So you think of something that you get like a Moosehead or a Budweiser or something, it doesn't have as much flavor as a typical ale or many craft beers.
What does IPA stand for?
IPA stands for India Pale Ale. So the history of that comes from, many years ago when Britain colonized India, and they would go on these long ship rides across the ocean. And so hops is actually a preservative. And they found if they put more of that in there, then the beer would stay good for longer into that journey. So it just kind of became a style that was made that way with more hops. It takes on more of a bitter flavor, the more hops and contact time you have with it.
What is ABV and how is it measured?
ABV stands for alcohol by volume. So it's basically the percentage of whatever you have, normally liquid or beer, what percentage of that is actual alcohol. So it's measured just by a formula. So as I said earlier, you get sugar from barley. You measure the amount of sugar. After it's fermented, you measure how much is gone. And then there's a formula from the amount of sugar eaten by the yeast that dictates how much alcohol is in the beverage.
How much alcohol content is typically in beer?
Normally beers would be 5 to 7%. There's a limit in Ontario of 11.9% on the high end. And there are some sessionable beers that are 1 to 2% alcohol. So there's a pretty big range, but normally most beers are going to be 5 to 7%.
What is skunked beer?
Skunked beer is the hops that Chris was talking about are used as a preservative, but if light hits them, they could give off an aroma that smells skunky. So that's why beer is stored either in aluminum cans or brown bottles, because if the sunlight hits it, it'll skunk it. And even if you're drinking a really hoppy beer outside on a sunny day, it can get that aroma going in a pretty short period of time.
How do you serve beer properly?
There are several things that go along with this question that are, you know, objective and subjective. So obviously when you pour the beer, you want to hold the glass at an angle. So when you pour the beer in, you don't end up filling up the glass with the head. You want to get as much beer in there, and you do want some head, but not half the glass. So if you tilt that glass and have a shorter distance from where the beer is pouring out and touching the glass, it won't build up as much head, and then as you get to the top you can sort of straighten it out and get the desired amount of head that you like. But temperature is also something that we're really passionate here about, finding the right temperature for serving the beer. And so, you know, stouts and beers that would have adjuncts in it, flavorings such as vanilla, you know, cocoa nibs, maple syrup, things like that, you're going to get a lot more aroma and flavor if it's a little warmer. So it's good to refrigerate those beers before you're drinking them, because that helps those flavors to hold on longer if you store them colder. But you want to take it out of the fridge 20 minutes, half an hour before you drink it, so that it gets a little closer to room temperature. We put 14 degrees Celsius on our stouts. We just find that's where you really start to get more aroma coming off of it and flavor. Our IPAs, we find you get more flavor at about 7 degrees Celsius. So don't take them directly out of the fridge and drink them. But of course, if it's middle of summer, then you might as well just take it out of the fridge, because it's going to continue to warm as you're drinking it. And it all comes down to personal preference on that. We just find if you take it right out of the fridge and drink it, you don't get as much of that aroma and flavor. And we want you to get all that goodness we put into the beer.
What are some common terms you will hear a brewer say?
So mashing is a popular one. So mashing is the process of turning you add the barley and water together, and that will convert it into sugar. Wort is another one. It's kind of funny, but that's what we call beer before it's fermented. So before you add the yeast into it, it's called wort. When you add yeast, it's called pitching yeast. And then another funny one is crashing. So if you're crashing a beer, you're actually just getting it very cold, close to 0 degrees, just to drops all the particulate out. And then you get some more clearer beer without a bunch of sediment in there. So yeah, crashing sounds like a little more dangerous than it really is.
How did Third Moon Brewing start?
Well, we started planning this about 5 years ago, and Bibo had already incorporated the business, and he already had, you know, this dream of opening this brewery. And then he approached me, and we started to work on it together. And after a lot of planning, we were almost ready to open, and the pandemic hit, which was not part of the plan. But the good thing was we had planned to start with doing packaged beer to go, having people order online and then just come pick up the beer. And that was the only thing we were actually allowed to do when we first opened, but that was in line with our business plan anyways. So it worked out in that sense that we didn't have to pivot or make some of the big changes that a lot of established breweries and businesses had to do because of it. So we've had this passion for years. We left our day jobs and our old lives behind, and we just went all in and did this. We feel like you can't really succeed at anything unless you go completely into it. So we've done that, and we've been just really grateful for the support and the response from our customers, including our local Milton folk.
What was the brewery's first craft beer?
First one we did was Cut Me Down, an IPA. What were the hops in that one? Do you remember? Columbus,
Sabro.
And yeah, it was really daunting the first time we started brewing on this system. And so that beer came out, and it wasn't awesome, but it was good enough that we were happy with it for our first attempt. And that's your hope when you're brewing the first beers, because you know everybody's watching. Everyone wants to know if you're a good brewery. And like anything, practice makes perfect. But those first beers are really important to show people what you're capable of, and we were proud of that effort, and we didn't have to dump it, so it was great.
How is your beer connected to the local area?
Well, the water we use comes right from Lake Ontario, so that's, that certainly makes us feel grounded to the land that we're brewing in, and then we try to use Ontario grown hops when we can. We actually have our Love Lies Bleeding series that focuses on just that, and showing people that you don't need to get hops from far away to make delicious beer. So those are a couple of the ways that we try to make ourselves feel connected with our surroundings, and then we work with many charitable groups in the area as well, and always try to use ingredients just like the honey in this beer is locally grown. So that's important to us.
Do you have efforts to be environmentally friendly?
Yes, so beer produces a significant amount of waste, but fortunately it is organic waste. So all the grains and hops and yeast we use, once it's done and in the process of being brewed, we have farmers that come get it. So that's fed to chickens and cows. So we're not throwing it away. So it's, either being composted or fed to animals. So that really decreases our footprint.
What is it like to work as a brewer?
It's challenging. It can be physical. There's a lot of heat and steam and boiling stuff and chemicals. But it's also very rewarding because at the end of the day, you're doing something you love. It's creative, and also, even worst case, you're still going to be able to get some beer out of it.
What is the best part about being a brewer?
I think the whole journey from planning a beer. So we'll sit down and we'll figure out what kind of beer we want to make, what we think we want it to taste like. Then the challenge of how do we convert this idea into a recipe, figuring out different techniques to use or ingredients to use, and then seeing it through to the final product. So when that beer comes off the canning line, it's an idea we might have had 2 or 3 months ago, and now you could hold it and drink it and people get excited about it. So that entire process is really the best part.
What are the challenges of being a brewer?
It's physically demanding. We all always have, we're limping around, got tennis elbow, and, ace bandages everywhere. So that's tough. And it can be long hours, and it can be unpredictable. So sometimes a brew wraps up and it's easy peasy and you can get out here in 6-7 hours. And sometimes it's, 14, 16, 18-hour days. So that could be tough.
Do you find, I would guess that, we all work to get the beer into the customer's hands and do different aspects of it. But, Bebo being the brewer, I would guess when that beer comes out, feels the pressure of that end result. Is the beer good? If people like it or they don't like it, that, we all feel responsible for that, but I could just imagine that would fall on you the hardest.
Yeah, definitely.
What snacks pair best with beer?
Well, I mean, when you look at some of the more traditional styles, you often see people pairing cheese and charcuterie with that. And that holds true. Certainly, we make New England style IPAs, so more of a modern type of an IPA, but they still work really well with meat and cheese and crackers, all those hearty foods. Our IPAs go really well with barbecued food. So chicken, beef, burgers, hot dogs. Typically those type of beers go well with greasy foods, and it's just, they go hand in hand, and those type of foods actually soak up beer too. So it's we always say when you're drinking, you got to eat. And that's, that's not just something for us, that's a saying that's centuries old or more. But another thing with some of our other styles of beer, like stouts and things like that, people will think sometimes that, oh, if I have a big rich chocolatey stout, then I should pair it with a rich chocolatey dessert. But we've learned that opposites sometimes give you a better punch and more wow factor in what you're pairing. Blue cheese you know, and the salty kind of nature of that can go really well with a barley wine, which is typically malt forward and sweet. So offsetting flavors will sometimes create that magic in your mouth that really elevates both the food and the beer. And that's the magic to us when it comes to pairing.
And have you ever tasted honey beer?
Yeah, the very first one I had was DuPont Beer de Meal. So it's a honey beer that they made, and that really opened my eyes many years ago when I first had that, and it's really delicious. Something we're tasting in this beer that we've just done in collaboration with you. We get lots of floral notes off the honey as well, and it's really interesting because you could use any old honey, but the quality of the honey will really shine through in the product, and we're really happy about this beer. We think that's what's happened here.
Perfect.